Okay, I'm going to get started. So welcome everyone to CADIA Connects, our first session of May. And I'm really excited for today's session. We're going to kick off a whole month of leadership through a DEI lens. And I'm really honored and thrilled to have our guests from Bridgewater Interiors with us today. We have the President and CEO, Ron Hall, and the Vice President of Human Resources, Elaine Tingle. And I'm going to read their bios and kind of set up the topic in just a moment. But I wanted to let everyone know, if you have questions as we go through today's discussion, feel free to enter into the chat or take yourself off mute. Jen and Margaret from Team CADIA will be monitoring the chat. We love these discussions to be interactive. So I've heard Ron speak a couple of times now, and just so authentic, and you'll be able to see he's got a really practical approach to diversity, equity, and inclusion. You'll also see that it's just something that's in the DNA of the way the company is ran, and Elaine is part of this as well. So first of all, let me just read Ron's bio because it is very impressive. Ron Hall Jr. is the president and CEO of Bridgewater Interiors, LLC, which is an automotive interiors manufacturing firm specializing in just-in-time assembly, sequencing, and delivery of seating systems. 2,400 people at 4 facilities in the US. And Ron has been occupying various roles of increasing responsibility since 2007. I'm excited to hear about your first role. He succeeded his father, who was the founder, Ron Hall Sr., in 2015. Also excited to hear more about Ron's father. What's interesting about Ron is he's a lawyer by training. Several years in his early career was spent as a corporate attorney at a prominent business law firm. He earned his Juris Doctor degree at the U of M Law School, where he was a Darrow Scholar, received the Book Award for Excellence in Administrative Law, and served as an associate editor on the Michigan Journal of International Law. What's also interesting about Ron is he holds a Bachelor of Science degree in International Political Economy from the United States Military Academy at West Point, and served several years on active duty as a field artillery officer in the US Army. Attained the rank of captain, and among other awards was decorated for meritorious service in the Persian Gulf War. So Ron also sits on multiple nonprofit boards, and he is interested in history, political affairs, and the various pursuits of his 4 children in fitness running. So really excited to talk to Ron. Elaine is a business professional with over 30 years of experience in progressive human resource roles. She's currently the Vice President of Human Resources and Community Affairs at Bridgewater Interiors. And in her role, she's responsible for employee and labor relations, managing community relations, and overall employee engagement. Elaine's community involvement activities include serving on the board of directors of Madison Carver Academy and on the board of the First Step organization, serving as board chair, as well as supporting many other charitable organizations in Metro Detroit. Elaine earned her Master of Public Administration degree from the University of Louisville, a Bachelor of Science in Administrative Support Management from Western Kentucky University, and is also a certified senior professional in human resources through SHRM. And Elaine also has some outside pursuits, loves youth mentorship, event planning, gardening, and spending time with family and friends. So welcome, Ron and Carrie. So very glad to have you both with us.
Thank you.
So would love to start off just talking about why I wanted to bring you both here. A couple of things caught my eye or caught my ear when I was hearing Ron speak. So I heard Ron speak at the MEMA DEI event, and really had a practical discussion about DEI. And what stood out was speaking about looking at DEI through intentionality. And also he mentioned that a large portion of his leadership team were former hourly workers. And if anyone knows my background, I have a background in tool and die. I went through a whole apprenticeship, and so I was on the hourly side. And I know that takes some intentionality. So that's really what attracted me to inviting Ron to join us on CADIA Connects. So when I invited Ron, the first thing he said was, well, I need my vice president of HR on the line with me. So that's how Elaine got invited. And I just think that speaks to Ron's character and value of being humble, right? And sharing the stage. So wanted to set that up. So why don't we start with Ron? Ron, I was interested in the legacy that your father left at Bridgewater Interiors, because myself, having spent a lot of time at Ford, Henry Ford has that huge legacy, as did Alan Mullally. And when I went to American Axle and Manufacturing, Dick Dowd did the same. So would love to hear a little bit about your father and the thumbprint that he left on Bridgewater Interiors.
Well, I actually think that, some of that legacy of the Ford family at Ford Motor Company is, kind of in the background of the DNA here at Bridgewater Interiors because of Dad's personal background. So, he was born and raised here in the city, and, the story of our family is really a story of the Great Migration, African Americans coming from the Deep South, trying to escape, the Jim Crow laws and other oppression in that region, and attracted by the plentiful and relatively much higher paying, factory jobs that were here in the North. So my paternal grandfather came north from Nashville, Tennessee. In around 1940, my grandmother came at about the same time from Paris, Kentucky. And they met here. She had a long career as a state bureaucrat, worked for the Secretary of State of Michigan for decades. And my grandfather worked at Ford Motor Company at the Rouge plant and became the union foreman at the Rouge plant, and was one of the founders of Local 600, which represents the hourly employees here at Bridgewater Interiors' Detroit facility today. And so, Dad, of course, was raised in that environment. And so, a lot of what that was about, the fraternal nature or the solidarity of unionization, the heavy hand of, a family who has, literally its name on the door and cares about what's going on at the company, a certain progressivism, and admittedly, haltingly, if you know the story of Ford Motor Company through the mid 20th century, but still a history of employment progressivism in a lot of ways. And I think that all of that, was kind of informative for him, as he grew up. And he was very much a very strong believer that economic opportunity for disenfranchised people, for, in this region, Black people in particular, was really the last frontier of the civil rights movement. I mean, if there's a lesson from my youth that I remember hearing all the time about the ways of the world, it was that. He was always entrepreneurial at heart. He spent the first 15 years of his working career out of college at Ford Motor Company. I remember he was a systems analyst before computers were computers, right? These are the years just before 1980 and, the huge explosion in the computer age. And I remember him on weekends having to go in late and taking me to the glass house and these rooms full of computers and the decks of cards that had.
Oh, do you remember? Oh my goodness.
Oh yeah,
it's
it had to
crazy.
be a
Yeah.
line just so. But even then he was thinking about leaving the company and wanting to own and run his own business. And I remember those conversations very clearly as well. And so, fast forward another couple decades, by the time he was able to launch Bridgewater Interiors, I think he brought a lot of that with him. He was very much about those things, treating people fairly, having compassion for people. Is just some notes I took before our call, and just resilience. He had to bounce back from some things along the way, and the importance of just kind of hanging in. And we've seen some examples of that even through his years at the helm here at the joint venture. So.
Wow, so much there, so much there. I was also a local 600 member. In fact, I ran for apprentice at large and won. So I was part of that whole local 600 thing. So interesting. I did not know that your father was there.
Yeah, my grandfather. And if you
Oh, your grandfather.
if you go to the building and by the
Yes.
front door where they have the names of the founding members of the union when they built the Union Hall, Robert E. Hall is the last name on the left. It's my grandfather.
That
And
is amazing.
so really cool, I think, that that union local in particular represents the employees at this company today. There's a real legacy strand there, and the employees are well aware of it. And frankly, I think it's why Dad was so popular.
Ah, yeah, that makes complete sense. And we could hear the lessons that you took from your father in your remarks. So thank you for that. Elaine, would love to know about your career path. So
Well, actually,
University of Louisville. So I'm assuming you're not from here.
I am not. I am a Kentucky native, and my career actually started in automotive as well. Right after I finished college, one of my first jobs was at General Motors at the Corvette plant in Bowling Green, Kentucky. And I actually worked on the assembly line in the chassis department on second shift. Um,
Wow. So you
yes.
get it.
So I don't think I told you that earlier.
Oh, that's
So
amazing.
I've had ties to automotive pretty much my entire working career. But anyway, I started there. I worked there for 8 months, and they had just added a second shift. And then after 8 months, they dissolved the second shift, so I was laid off at that point. But for me, that was, looking back in hindsight, that is one of the things that I think it's been good for my career, is helped me to shape me in understanding, how hourly workers, come in and, do their day-to-day job, some of the challenges that they are faced with. But I did that role for 8 months. And then, like I said, I was laid off. So I actually took like 6 months off from work and didn't do anything other than, I think GM was offering Dale Carnegie classes at that time for free. So I took advantage of that. And I went through the Dale Carnegie class. I actually won a few awards along the way during the class. And then after that, I went back to work, and then I've pretty much, my whole career has been, my roles have been in human resources and in automotive. 29 years ago, I started working formally Johnson Controls, Adient now. I took a role as human resources manager, and that kind of kicked my, I guess, say, current career, because I'm still, working now for the joint venture Bridgewater Interiors. But during that time, I've had the opportunity to take on, several different roles. At one point, I was a human resources black belt for North America, for still in HR, but a little bit different than my day-to-day human resources manager role. And then my role prior to going to Bridgewater was, I was global director of HR for the foam department. That role took me a little bit out of my element, and makes me, I guess, kind of shapes me a little bit in where I am today, in that I didn't apply for that role. I was sought out, and I believe I was sought out because I was an internal minority within the company. My boss was also minority, and he gave me an opportunity. I didn't have all my T's crossed, my I's dotted, didn't have any global experience, but they gave me the opportunity to learn, develop, surrounded me with people who had helped make me successful. But it also helped me, or positioned me for my current role here in Bridgewater, because when Bridgewater then needed someone in the HR role, they sought me out. And I believe it's because of, where I was at currently in my career. And then obviously, as I went to Bridgewater, then I try to, again, do those same things for individuals. We as a company actually, give people opportunity, even though they may not have every, item of experience that, that you may need. And I think we talked before, like sometimes females mainly, if they don't have every um, bit of
Box
the
checked, yes.
credentials, yeah, things checked, they don't necessarily apply. But sometimes you have to, take that step and recognize, you may have individuals may have traits that will make them successful, even though they don't have the experience and ability. And, you know, you have to give those people opportunities and chances.
Yes, wow. I did not know you had the hourly assembly background. That's
I was a
incredible.
UAW member at one time.
I love it. I love it. It's interesting. When I first landed at the Rouge complex, and this is, oh my goodness, I was in my early 20s, right? Had never been in a factory before and so overwhelmed. And there was one other female tool and die apprentice, and she came from the railroad. Also spent some time in Dearborn assembly plant hanging doors, which she said was just such hard work. She had just taken her Dale Carnegie course. So she was all about smiles, and she helped me survive in that environment because she was saying, you have to smile. You're not going to be approachable. People won't help you if you're not smiling. So that was like my biggest early lesson about smiling. But you shared, you didn't have all those boxes checked and somebody approached you with opportunity. And I would assume that's like a muscle that grew stronger. And now you probably wouldn't think anything of having this opportunity in front of you without having all the boxes checked. And I would assume that is really what is at the heart of the way you all develop hourly people. It's really an investment in people. But can you share kind of what was that switch for you? How did you say, yes, I can do this, and overcome maybe that fear that may have been present when you didn't have all those boxes checked?
Well, I think it first started with conversation from my leaders and managers of feeling secure that they would not let me fail, and knowing myself that I would do everything that, I would do to also, surround myself with people and do my homework as far as learning the job and everything that I could do. But I think initially started with the conversation of knowing people around me that could help make me successful, and then providing me with the tools, to learn my job and the opportunity to learn. So I think that was initially what helped, and then the rest was, getting out there and doing the work. It wasn't always easy, especially with the global role, because everything is different in every country. And I had to do research, I had to do my own work, and then networking is huge in any role. Because you need people to help guide you, to put you in the right places, or connect you with others or resources, to help you be successful as well. So that was pretty key for me.
Yes, yes. Network is so important, and knowing that people aren't going to let you fail. Boy, that's huge. So Ron, what percentage of your leadership team today is former hourly staff?
Well, when you heard me quoted it, I said 44%. That was a number that was true as of late last summer. I have not been updated on it, but thank goodness Elaine is on the line, because I bet she. But it's about that. It's in the 40 to 45% range.
Yes, yes. So what has shaped your approach to developing people and taking a chance on people, even if they don't have all of the boxes checked?
Well, certainly the biggest influence on me was my military training. It was a real privilege, to be sent by the citizens of, the state, and trained really by the taxpayers of the United States. I have the privilege of going to one of the great leadership institutions in the country. West Point trains Army officers, and some of that is strategic, tactical, and technical, but a huge piece of that is leadership training. Um, I don't want to overuse the word intentional, but they are very intentional about it. And they get that, the most important thing that junior officers need to be able to do is lead and manage people effectively. And they can train you how to, shoot the guns and blow things up as needed along the way. And I think I didn't appreciate at the time how unique how unique that kind of training is and how impactful it can be in environments where that kind of training is not as widespread. And I'm generally referencing to my entire civilian career. I have been struck time and again, both when I worked in legal services and since I've been in automotive management, at how many people, are promoted because they have, some technical capability or they're in the right place at the right time, might have a fantastic work ethic, but people don't get a lot of formal leadership and management training. And, before the buzzword was servant leadership, the United States military was training officers in, the ways of servant leadership. So for me, a lot of it started there. Um, Along the way, I've had some fantastic mentors. I know when we spoke, on a previous panel, you were talking about mentors and sponsors and distinguishing between the two. And I commented, that I had, the great benefit of having both coming to the company, working for my father here for 8 years. Um, he was both a mentor and very much a sponsor at the company and away from it. You reference, some of these boards in which, I'm privileged to sit now, but, I'm on those boards because, 20 years ago, he started opening, people still had Rolodexes then, literally he had a Rolodex on his desk.
That's right.
When I was a young person, really just coming into the business scene in Detroit, he took it upon himself to make sure that I got introduced around to people in different spaces. Some of those people became mentors. So I would say, the early training and then the mentorship along the way are probably the two biggest influences.
Yeah, and the importance of mentorship. You spoke about an experience in the military early on where you weren't in a good place. You didn't have a good mentor. Can you share a little bit about the shift that happened once you were able to have somebody who really had your back?
Sure. The short version of that story is that I was assigned to an artillery battalion in the 1st Cavalry Division, stationed out of Fort Hood, Texas. That was the unit with whom I went to the Gulf and came back. And in my first couple of years, we had a very challenged leadership culture in the unit, ultimately because we had an unethical officer in command. And I had lots of early problems with that. Some of it surely was on me. I don't think I handled it all very well. I was, young and brash, and I had come out of the ivory tower environment and felt very strongly that I knew the right way to do it, and wasn't really into, going along to get along, which was kind of the ethos of the unit at that time. We had, it all kind of came to a head. The officer, was given a career-ending assignment, and we got a new commander who, for me, was just, to call it a breath of fresh air is really an understatement. Lieutenant Colonel Nicholas Johnson, West Point class of '74. I say his name out loud whenever I can. He's easily the best boss I've ever had. He's the best mentor I've ever had. He came to that unit. It was, late in his career, right? I said 74. This is almost the mid 90s. 20 years to be a lieutenant colonel and in battalion command for your first time, in that day in the Army meant that this was kind of the end of the road for you. So he didn't have a lot of aspirations of being a general. He didn't have to play politics. He just came in and applied the lessons that he had learned through, 20 years of coming up through the ranks, and applied them, and gave junior officers, the freedom to lead the right way. And it gave me an opportunity to go out on a much higher note, than I would have anticipated a couple of years prior. I actually had planned to resign my commission a year earlier than I did, and had planned it. My wife, all this, she was ready to come back to Michigan, and he asked me to stay on because he was trying to turn around the culture in the unit, and saw that I had been on board with that. And I still remember a painful conversation going back to my apartment and saying, Colonel Johnson says he needs me. I got to stay in another year. And, that was tough. but I'm really glad I did it. Learned a lot from him. And the big lesson was just, leadership matters. The tone from the top matters. We hear it all the time, but, someone who was leading, with some integrity and some character and according to the unit mission and driving that down from the top makes all the difference in the world to whether a unit or a company is going to be successful or not.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing that story. And we never know who we're going to be impacting. And I can see somebody 20 years from now stating your name out loud.
That would be nice.
So Elaine, can you talk a little bit about support for people that you're developing into leadership roles? I think you've talked about a leadership program that you all put together.
Yes. So a couple of things. So a lot of our people, we talked about the 44%. A lot of our production employees have the opportunity to go into supervisory positions and also some other entry level type positions. And, coming from a union environment into a salary world could be a little bit intimidating at times. So we do have training matrix that we have for every position. And we basically, when someone takes a new role, we go over the training matrix and identify opportunities and gaps. And then basically, again, is having those conversations with those individuals to assure them that, you're going to provide them mentorship, you're going to help them be successful, and surround them with, opportunities to make them successful. So we have a supervisory training class that also not only teaches employees about the soft skills, but also other characteristics that not necessarily, this on the job specifics that they need, but just, general soft skills type training that they need for any role to be successful. Also, we, when the need arises and when we can, we send some of our salary team members to help out at other Bridgewater facilities or even Adient facilities, because we also feel like, you learn outside of your current environment as well, because even though all of our plants pretty much operate very similar, but there are differences. And you learn something every time that, you go to a different environment, you interact with different people, you establish different relationships. So we found that that's been helpful as well, for our team. So not only providing them, opportunity for training inside the facility, but so also outside the facility as well. So.
I think that's so important. I've shared with both of you, and I don't tell this story often. When I transitioned from hourly to salary, I just felt unsupported, and I felt like I was in the wrong place. And I actually went back to hourly for about 10 months until somebody came and found me and brought me back to the salaried side. So having that support and that training matrix and those experiences to be in a different environment, so important. You also mentioned like entry level roles, and I know we had a conversation about some more difficult to fill roles, and maybe sometimes not truly or maybe underestimating the education and the skill of your hourly workers. So have you been able to find talent in unexpected places in some other areas?
Yes, and I think we were just referring to the story where, just for instance, in human resources, we just made an offer to an hourly employee who has a bachelor's degree in criminal justice. It's been in our hourly ranks for a number of years. And she just accepted a role into human resources. Of course, she doesn't necessarily have a human resources background, but she's got the foundation for the talent that we need in human resources. And I just had a conversation with her new manager about the same thing, her losing I'll say the comfort blanket of being in the union and coming over to, the salary side of the house. But we feel like she'll be a great asset, and being that I think everyone kind of knows the labor market is not really good right now for finding talent in any position. So we've been looking more internally, looking at, let's look at the talent that we have in-house already. Folks who know our business, we know they're dedicated to the company. They've been with us for a number of years and they understand, the ins and outs. And you can't find any greater talent from someone that already has that background, even though they don't have the specifics that you're looking for in a particular position. But as long as they have a desire to learn, and we provide them the opportunity for growth and the training that they need, we've been finding success there. So that's been kind of the in this day and time where we're struggling like everybody else to finding good talent. We're turning to within and looking in our own our own people. I personally didn't know this lady, didn't know she was there with with that background, and I'm sure there are a lot of others who maybe they aren't complete with their degrees, but they've started that foundation. And also we have tuition reimbursement program that employees can take advantage of to further their career. So we don't have as many people as we like right now taking advantage of that, but it is something that we encourage. We remind people the whole time, all the time about it. And we do have good success stories within that 44% of people who have started, have come to work for the company, have earned their degree, and they have moved up. And that makes us feel very proud.
And just think about the loyalty. I mean, Ron, you shared that experience where you stayed in the military longer than intended because, you felt like you were invested in and you wanted to give back, and, taking a chance on someone, bringing them on, even if they don't have all the boxes checked, investing in that talent is just such a good way to breed loyalty.
And to protect your culture, right? I mean, because
Yeah.
those are the people who really know who you are as a company. They know where the dark corners are. They can bring a lot of authenticity to discussions about, hey, what do we need to make the company better? We're talking about how much we're struggling for people now. Are we better off adding a shift premium here, or adding an across the board lift here? I mean, we have a lot of people who lived in different spaces of the company, who can weigh in on that. And we have a culture where we bring those voices to the table to help inform our decisions. And I think it's very reinforcing for who we are and who we're trying to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Melissa has a question. Is the JCI Bridgewater employee turnover rate lower than industry? I'm not sure if you know what the industry turnover rate is and how you're doing comparatively.
The last time I looked into this, yes, we have very low turnover rates. We talked about this a little bit last year and decided to just close our eyes and not look again until after the pandemic, because the numbers are really ugly right now. And when we get into the details and talk to people about why they're making some of the choices they're making about leaving us, or making decisions to change their situation at the company, a lot of it is pandemic driven. But as recently as a couple of years ago, then yes, I think we enjoyed generally lower turnover than peer companies, in most of our plants anyway, 3 of the 4 plants.
Yeah. Ron, what was your first role at Bridgewater Interiors?
I was a commercial manager. I was brought over to assist in the business relationship with Ford Motor Company. On a lot of you online who are automotive people will remember the U22X program. That was Ford Expedition and Lincoln Navigator. And the volume, so we were building the seating for the vehicle at the Bridgewater Warren facility. The volumes on that vehicle, you can tell I'm still scarred, had fallen from something like 160,000 a year down to about 54,000 a year. And our great friends at Ford Motor Company didn't understand why the company couldn't afford to continue to build the seats at the same price. And so I was brought in. It was really kind of a special project, was, the vehicle to kind of bring me in and begin to expose me to work at the joint venture. And my funny story about it, and I hope it's funny, is, when you're really green in a role, you just don't know what you want, what you're doing yet. You don't know what you don't know, and you can be a little overly eager to impress. And so here, I bring a lawyer's background, and I'm coming back to kind of commercial space, which involved legal contracts after 3 years in a training rotation, essentially. And so I go to the contracts, I go to the purchase order terms and conditions, and I look at the statement of work and the other agreements between the companies. And I go, oh, well, it seems like if we want to quit the program, we've got to give a lot of notice, like 18 months notice. So I better do that right now while we continue the conversation. Yeah, and you're laughing because right? Thou shalt not ever tell the customer you don't want to build the seats anymore. All hell broke loose, pardon my French, and the JCI execs are calling my father and swearing and what is he doing and blah, blah, blah. And, it was a fast lesson that in automotive, at least, the contracts aren't the contracts. And never mind all that legal stuff. This is about business relationships and so on. But anyway, that was the original project. And it mostly worked out. A year later, we got, a significant price increase and successfully shepherded the program to Kentucky, which is the longest logistics train we've ever managed in seating. That truck was built from Kentucky for a long time until it came onto the current program.
Wow, I love that story. Thank you for sharing. It just demonstrates your passion. I love it. Passion first. I know you're both very involved with DEI within Bridgewater and outside. So I'd love to hear from both of you in terms of what are you doing inside Bridgewater Interiors on DEI? And then Ron, I know you're very active with the Business Leaders of Michigan, working on a project for racial equity. So can we hear a little bit about that? And then I'm happy to take some questions from the participants after that.
Yeah, DE&I is a little bit of a round peg square hole issue for us because we kind of feel, well, I'll speak for myself and I'll invite Elaine to come in. I feel like the world has kind of come to us. The company exists in large part because of the supplier diversity development movement in the automotive industry. And so we are always looking through, living through, managing through racialness as a prism to some extent. Now, no, it doesn't affect how we build the car seats, but it affects just about everything else. Our relationships with the customers, the way we engage with the community externally, the who's and the how's of that. Our internal relationship within the joint venture, Adient, I think it's fair to say, like a lot of corporations, is going through some of its own reckoning now about where it is and isn't, on DE&I issues, and is looking to us, a lot of not just myself and Elaine, but other managers at the joint venture to kind of help them navigate through that. I love that. I think that's a positive thing, and I'm hopeful that we're going to be able to help them a lot with the things that they're a big company with a lot on the plate and a lot to manage. We're up close and personal to this stuff every day. So when I say round peg square hole issue, it's kind of a what needs to be different, right? What does DE&I, what are our gaps at DE&I? Because we're covering the big things that a lot of companies are really just beginning to focus on. But when you talk about LGBTQ, we talked a little bit before about our experience with an employee who changed genders on the job, right. Kind of all the ways we had, and Elaine deserves all the credit in the world for navigating us and coaching the leaders through that, so that we could be successful and make sure that person had continued to be successful at work and be comfortable at work and so forth. For us, DE&I is about looking at the harder spaces that I think a lot of companies haven't gotten to yet. And what about, I don't like this word, but for brevity I'll use it, reverse discrimination issues. How do I make sure that the 35% or so of the employees who are white are, as comfortable as a lot of companies are trying to think about how to make their 35% of their employees who are people of color comfortable and aligned and all these kinds of things.
Oh, it's so important. I was sharing a little bit, just the conversation I was having with my fiance about diversity, equity, and inclusion. He's a white male, and so he feels like he's losing out, this zero-sum game. And, I think that we have to have these conversations, and the mantra that keeps coming up in my mind is we go together. Like, we need everybody's input to whatever the strategy is going to be. It can't just be one demographic group or one functional group working on this. It's got to be input from all, and everybody's got to be included. I love the GM, is everybody in? We've got to go together. So Elaine, would love to hear from you on your view of DEI. It sounds like it's kind of just embedded in how you operate, but.
It actually is. Ron went back in his earlier comment when he was talking about his dad. His dad truly had a passion for people, and he took time to talk to people, have conversations with them, encourage them to, do their best. So it's always been instilled, with him being the founder of the company. It's always been instilled in the leaders to always seek out and, give people a hand up. So one thing that we do, we just actually did this last Friday, I believe, we have leader talent reviews. In those reviews, we do those quarterly, and we look at all of, not all, but a large portion of our minority population. We identify individuals all across the company, production, et cetera, and identify those high potentials that we really want to keep on our radar screen to help further develop. We also look at individuals to say, okay, who can we give this stretch assignment to that will help further them in their development? So we are very intentional in looking at minority employees and making having discussion about, what can we do to help them further in their career. We do that quarterly. We do it pretty consistently, and we've had very good outcomes for us intentionally moving people in roles, identifying, okay, maybe they're not ready now, they're ready next, 12 months, et cetera, and identifying roles and actually moving and putting them in those roles as opportunities become available. So I think we do a good job in that area, and it's intentional what we do.
And that's so foundational. Sometimes we talk to companies that don't have a good people process in place. They're not doing those talent reviews. And, being able to look at who's ready now, who's ready with development, how do we get them ready? How do we give them access to maybe opportunities to have more exposure, to be more visible, to take on those high value assignments. So important that you put that investment in.
Yeah, and I'll just make this comment. Ron walks the floor, of all of our facilities, has lots of conversations with people. And even in his conversations, as people tell him that, they want to do, X, Y, and Z next, he comes back and he gives me those names of those people. Some of them I've never heard of, or we'll do some investigation. We'll ask their supervisor, hey, how is this person? And, do they have potential? Those people are on our radar screen too, just from the fact that he's out, socializing with employees, and employees, telling him, that what their interests are, and him coaching them, and then us keeping them on our radar screen, and then providing, planning opportunities to provide them with. So he's really good at that.
Yeah, I love that. Management by walking around.
Yes.
I would also add that, I think companies have to be willing to go the other way too. Another thing we talk about at LTR is, we have some managers who are very, very technically talented people in their space, but who are not personality fits. They are not the kind of leaders that we're describing here, and that we know that we need throughout the organization to be a place that continues to lift people up. And I think that you have to be willing to let people like that go at some point. In my experience, it's not hard because they never want for opportunities elsewhere. But you have to have the discipline to know what you want in a personality type. And, once you equip a manager and give them some of the leader tools and give them an opportunity to lead the way you believe in, if they don't do it, and you don't remove them, I think you're inviting toxicity to some point. And you have to be willing to make, decisions both ways. You're pulling people up, but you're also pushing the wrong people out. And sometimes that's a painful thing because, right, you don't want to give away that great talent who, boy, the numbers always come in under that person, right? The stats, the KPI always look like what they look like under that person. But, Elaine's sitting on, a mountain of complaints about the way, he or she treats people. And, you got to kind of hold your nose and do what you need to do. I think that's a tougher muscle to exercise. And again, I don't pretend that we're perfect at it, but it is something that we talk about. And I think you have to be intentional about that as well. And one more thing, it's been my experience, just back to the comment of your fiance, that the white guys do just fine. When they come and they work hard and they learn stuff, they knock it out of the park and they get along with everybody and they buy into the culture, those people rise. You can't hold them down. I think it almost happens organically. I think when we talk a lot about intentionality, we just find that there are, soft and hard barriers around a lot of the Black and brown, people of color employees. And I would say it's been a gender issue, especially in the automotive manufacturing space as well, where, you got to actively work to knock down some of those barriers so that those people can come up to. I don't think it's about holding people back. It's about making it easier for more people to come up.
Wow, I love it. Your comment about toxicity. Our guest last week, Cornelia Shipley, shared a quote with us. Your culture is defined by the worst behavior you tolerate. So thank you for underscoring that. Any questions from those online? I want to give you all an opportunity to chime in here. I'm seeing some great comments in the chat. It's fun watching them.
Yeah, and I want to say, I want to say to the audience, I have not been distracted at all, but you see me look aside. Those of you who know me know I can't see for anything. So I'm looking into a small screen, but there's a bigger one where I can read the chat over here. That's what I do.
Excellent, excellent.
This is Verna. I don't have any questions, but of course I have to give a shout out to Ron and to Elaine. I've known them for many, many, many years and had the pleasure of working with both of them. And they are definitely a true testament as to what they are presenting to us today in ensuring that the Black and the brown community are represented within the organization, and they are a pillar in the organization, in the community, and in the automotive industry as to what an MBE looks like, and it is a true example of what that workforce looks like, not just in the leadership positions, but also those that are coming in and working on the assembly floor. So just wanted to say hi to both of you. Great job.
Oh, thank you, Verna.
Now, what she's not telling you is that she is singularly responsible, well, maybe not singular, largely responsible for setting that culture and tone through the company's first decade plus. Elaine is exactly the second person in her role in the company's 22-year history, and Verna Ginyard was the first. And she left us for bigger things and greener pastures, but through that first initial stretch, which is so important to determining what a company is going to be, that first, 12 years or so, it was Verna Ginyard who put a lot of these things in place and helped my father implement, the kind of vision that we've been talking about. Oh,
it's amazing. And Verna and we just connected, last week, right?
Yes, I believe so. Thank you, Ron. That wasn't a fishing tool, but I appreciate it.
I mean it. I'm happy to say it.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Cheryl, there's another question that came in on the chat a little bit ago from Timothy Hawes. He has a question for Ron, and he said, I love your story about the failed commander. In the civilian world, we often see that same scenario. What advice do you have for those of us who face failure in leadership? Should we be silent and wait until they collapse under their own shortcomings? Or do we stand up, speak out, even with the risk of serious repercussions? And I think we've all seen that when we have a leader or even report to a leader who's not doing well. What advice do you have for us?
I think you have to do some of both. I think your first instinct should be to, support the company's vision and goals, and to support even a bad boss as best you can, and be judicious about taking your opportunities for lifting up, the ways in which, you are trying to contribute positively, and watch your back. That's a tough situation to be in. I lived an experience like that, in my Johnson Controls years before I came to Bridgewater, and hard. It's a lot of balancing, but I think you should keep the faith, and keep your values compass where you know it needs to be, and try to trust that the organization will eventually make some changes around you. That has happened to me both times. I've been in a really bad situation. The organization eventually recognized what was going on, and made some effective change. And finally, I guess I'd say at some point, if that doesn't happen, it's a wide open job market right now. And I'm sure there are other companies who are living their values who would love to have your talent.
Wow, great answer.
Yep, thank you.
Keith, did you want to take yourself off mute, or would you like me to read your question? So Keith asks, curious from the panel, what technical skills are needed to be successful in the DEI realm?
That's an Elaine question.
As far as technical, I talked about the soft skills earlier. I think the soft skills are very important, along with whatever skill set you need for your individual department or goals. I just heard, I think it was on the news yesterday or the day before, where a lot of companies, because of this whole labor shortage now, they're hiring people that have the soft skills versus the actual technical skills that they need for the actual roles. And I think they were particularly talking about college graduates, but others as well, because, they will, if you have a person has the foundation and, they know how to talk to people, communicate, etc., they can be taught in most instances, depending on the roles they go in, they can be taught and trained for the disciplines that they need to go in. So, as far as technical, again, it depends on, what area that you're going into, but you have to have soft skills regardless of where you go. So I would put more emphasis on soft skills versus the technical.
And I am seeing more and more emphasis on the soft skills. I even heard them referred to as essential skills moving forward. So important.
I think in the DEI space, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I was going to say in the DEI space in particular, I think you have to be especially comfortable speaking truth to power. It's been my life experience that people of different races don't like talking about race and racialness and racism and race issues. And it's, the DE&I professional who's got to break through that and get people to come to hard conversations authentically. And, so you can't be the squeamish person in that three-way conversation. I would say that's another big part of it.
Boy, that is so true. That is so true. And Yvonne has a comment. We need to normalize these conversations. It's interesting. We've seen more and more companies having these conversations inside work after the events of spring and summer in 2020, after George Floyd was murdered. And we had the benefit of sitting in on a focus group, and the tone was almost like, you mean it's okay to talk about race? I mean, we haven't talked about, and there was just this, timidness. People didn't really want to say what was on their mind, right? But I I've seen a huge change over the last year, and getting over some of that uncomfortableness. So I agree with you 100%. And I think that leads into what I wanted to know about your work on racial equity with the Michigan business leaders. Would you like to talk about that?
Yeah, so Business Leaders of Michigan is an association of generally of the largest, as a measure of revenue, the largest businesses in the state. I think the threshold is, 500 million and headquartered here. And so, your Whirlpools and the DeVos, I'm sorry, not the family, Amway, the furniture companies, Herman Miller, all of those, are members. General Motors, of course, for the automakers. And we're really all about trying to make Michigan a top 10 state. So I encourage all of you to check out the website at businessleadersformichigan.com. And in the last year, or literally last summer, there was some discussion about, and then a decision to stand up a committee to address matters of racial equity. And I was asked to co-chair that committee with Andrea Owen, who's the CEO on the other side of the state at Herman Miller, the furniture company I referenced. And we've made a lot of great progress and had some great support and internal discussions about how are we, Michigan's largest companies, going to lead the way toward having and encouraging greater racial equity in the region. And we've got some plans pending, a board meeting literally in a couple of weeks, and we'll be making some announcements. So I don't want to say too much about that, except that we're actively working on it. We did say publicly that we were doing some polling about where our members are on their DE&I efforts, their formal efforts. We've done that and are talking a lot about the results. And as you would imagine, companies are kind of all over the spectrum. There are some firms that are very sophisticated in their DE&I practices and procedures, and others less so. And what we're trying to do is establish a vehicle where all of us can get in, to borrow the General Motors phrase, and move forward from where we are. So more to come, but I will tell you the organization has already determined it's very committed to it. That ad hoc committee has become a permanent committee. And I'm pleased at where we're going. And back to the comments about race and racism and how uncomfortable they are for people. There are a lot of household names, people who are very famous business people in this state, who I will tell you have that same problem, even in close quarters, talking in groups of 5 and 8 about these issues is really, really difficult stuff and striking to me because, these people are so dynamic and so forceful in leading their companies, and they're so smart. They know a lot about a lot of things. But when it comes to, how are we going to have better race reconciliation in this region, they're as flummoxed as a lot of us on this call. So we're working on it.
Yeah, wow. Thank you for sharing that, and really excited to hear more about that when you're able to talk about it.
Sure.
And you're making me think that these discussions and this truth to power, it's a leadership competency we all need to develop. So a minute left. Final words. Wow, this just flew by. I knew it would. You both are awesome. Thank you so much for your time. But closing comments.
I think my only comment, first, Cheryl, thank you for inviting us, and Ron, thank you for inviting me as well to participate with you. I think, this whole journey is still work in progress with DE&I, just again, navigating difficult conversations and kind of understanding where we are. We're still working on that as a company, and we'll continue to work on it till, as we need to.
It's a journey. Thank you, Elaine. Ron?
I think my comment is to be hopeful. At my core, I'm a patriot. I believe in the American experience. I believe in representative democracy, and that as messy as this is and as hard as this issue and others facing our country are, that we are going to figure it out, because this is the best way for people set up in a government like this is the best way for people to live together and move forward that the world has known. So let's be hopeful and everybody, do their part, and we will get better at figuring out how to live and thrive together.
Thank you. Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much. You filled me up. I'm more inspired now. Thank you
for
so
having me.
much.
Thank you.
All right. Have a wonderful day. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.